The crisp paper felt heavier than it should, the ink spelling out a sum that made my hands tremble, $80,000. My lawyer gave me a reassuring nod from across the mahogany table, but I could only stare at the check, the final proof that I had won. But to understand how I got this check, we have to go back to the beginning. 6 months ago, my world smelled of grease and desperation. My official title was shift crew at the Burger Barn, a glorious name for a glorified fry cook and cashier. My days were a blur of beeping timers, sputtering fry baskets, and the endless chirpy refrain of, "Welcome to the Burger Barn. Can I take your order?" I spent 8 hours a day on my feet, navigating floors slick with a permanent film of oil, my polyester uniform sticking to my skin under the heat lamps. The worst part wasn't the rude customers or the manager, Dale, who watched the security cameras like a hawk to make sure no one was sneaking an extra onion ring. The worst part was the smell. It clung to me, embedding itself in my hair, my clothes, my very pores. No matter how long I stood in the shower, I could never quite scrub away the ghost of stale French fries. I endured it for one reason: Northwestern University. My acceptance letter was taped to the inside of my locker, a constant, glossy reminder of the finish line. Every paycheck, every crumpled dollar bill from the tip jar was part of the plan. I'd come home, my feet throbbing and my back aching, and perform my ritual. I'd lay my earnings out on my bedroom floor, smoothing the bills. 20% went into a jar labeled gas and emergencies. The rest, every last cent, went into a shoebox destined for a savings account I'd named College Life Fund. This was for books, for a new laptop, for the occasional pizza with new friends. It was my own contribution, my skin in the game. The big money, the tuition and board, was already taken care of, or so I believed. The college fund, as my parents called it, was a family legend. It was started by my grandparents with a savings bond and nurtured by my parents for 18 years. It was the bedrock of my future, the great parental sacrifice that would launch me into the life they always said they wanted for me. It was a sacred, untouchable thing. I remember one night in particular, stumbling through the front door, close to midnight. The house was quiet, except for the bluish glow of the TV in the living room, where my parents were sitting on the couch, watching some late-night talk show. "There's our little worker bee," my mom said, not taking her eyes off the screen. She patted the cushion next to her. "Come sit for a minute. You look dead on your feet." I collapsed onto the sofa, the soft fabric, a welcome relief after a day on hard linoleum. The exhaustion was so deep it felt like it had settled in my bones. My dad glanced over, a faint smile on his face. "Tough shift?" "The milkshake machine broke again," I mumbled, leaning my head back. "It sprayed a family of 4. The dad wanted free food for a month." "That's our girl, handling the public," he said with a chuckle, "building character. You won't have to deal with that nonsense for much longer. Just a few more months and you'll be in Evanston, surrounded by future doctors and senators." "I know," I said, a genuine smile touching my lips for the first time all day. I was just calculating in my head. The money from my shoebox should be enough to cover all my textbooks for the first year. My mom finally turned to look at me, her expression a practiced blend of affection and pity. "Oh, sweetie, you and that shoebox," she said, reaching over to brush a stray piece of hair from my forehead. "It's adorable that you're so responsible, but you don't need to kill yourself for textbook money. That's what the fund is for. We've got you completely covered. It's all taken care of." "We're so proud of you for working hard, though," my dad added quickly. "It just means you'll appreciate what you have more. But your mother's right. That Burger Barn money is just for fun. The important stuff? Handled." He gestured vaguely, as if handled was a physical location he could point to. "Now go take a shower, honey. You smell like a deep fryer." They both laughed, a warm, familiar sound that filled the room. I laughed with them, feeling a surge of gratitude. I felt so lucky, so loved. I went to bed that night feeling secure in the knowledge that my parents had my back, that my future was safe in their hands. I had no idea that their words, meant to sound like a comforting promise, were just the pretty wrapping on an empty box. The day the promise shattered was a Tuesday in August, hot and suffocatingly humid. Orientation week was 2 weeks away. I'd already quit the Burger Barn, turning in my grease-stained uniform with a theatrical flair that earned me a dirty look from Dale. My room was a chaotic landscape of cardboard boxes and packing tape. My life was finally starting. I found my parents in the kitchen, nursing their morning coffees at the table. A pile of mail sat between them, mostly bills and junk. The atmosphere was deceptively normal. "Morning," I said, grabbing the milk from the fridge. I was just on the phone with the bursar's office at Northwestern. "They need the account info for the tuition payment. Can you guys write down the bank and account number for the college fund?" Silence. It wasn't a comfortable silence. It was a sudden, heavy blanket thrown over the room. My dad stared into his coffee cup as if it held the secrets to the universe. My mom picked up a credit card offer from the mail pile and began turning it over and over in her hands. "Mom?" I asked, my voice a little tight. "The account number?" She took a slow, deliberate sip of her coffee, her eyes fixed on the wall behind me. "There's been a change of plans, honey." A cold knot formed in my stomach. What kind of change of plans? My dad cleared his throat, but no words came out. He just looked at my mom, a silent, pathetic plea in his eyes. "We had an opportunity," my mom said, her voice crisp and businesslike. It was the voice she used with contractors and bank tellers, not with me. "A really great investment. Your father's friend, Jim, had a can't-miss idea for a franchise." "A franchise?" I repeated, the words feeling foreign and bizarre. "What does that have to do with my tuition?" She finally met my gaze, and her expression was hard, defensive. "We needed capital to get in on the ground floor. It was a family investment." The cold knot in my stomach turned to ice. I could barely get the words out. What did you do?" "We moved the money," she said, waving her hand dismissively, as if she'd simply transferred funds from checking to savings, from the education account. It was just sitting there, not doing anything. This was a way to make it grow. "So you'll move it back, right?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The payment is due next week." My dad finally spoke, his voice a low mutter. "The franchise went under, honey. We lost it." I felt the floor drop out from under me. I gripped the edge of the counter to keep from falling. "Lost what? How much?" "All of it," my mom snapped, her patience gone. "We lost all of it. The account is empty." $124,000. The savings bond from my grandparents. 18 years of my parents. Contributions. My entire future. Gone. Used to buy into a gourmet hot dog stand that went bankrupt in 3 months. "You're kidding," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. "This is a joke, right? You promised me. You told me it was handled. You told me my Burger Barn money was just for fun. And you should be grateful for the years you didn't have to worry," she shot back, standing up. Her chair scraped loudly against the tile. "We gave you everything! A roof over your head, food on the table. This was our money to begin with. We saved it. We decided it was time to use it for the good of the whole family, not just for your expensive school." "My school?" My voice rose, cracking with disbelief. "You told me to apply. You pushed me. You held that fund over my head my entire life as proof that you were supporting me." "Support isn't a blank check, young lady," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "It's about appreciating what you're given. And frankly, after this display of pure selfishness, I'm not sure you deserve it anyway. You don't deserve it." Those 4 words hit me harder than the financial blow. It wasn't just about the money, it was about my worth. In her eyes, I had none. I just stood there, speechless, the sound of her words echoing in the sudden quiet. And I know this is a heavy part of the story. If you're just finding my channel, you might want to hit subscribe because you won't believe where this goes next. I backed away from them, out of the kitchen, and stumbled into my room. The packed boxes felt like a mockery. My Northwestern sweatshirt was laid out on my bed, a vibrant purple beacon of a future that had just been extinguished. I sank to the floor, my hand going to the shoebox under my bed. I pulled it out, the worn cardboard cool against my trembling fingers. Inside were the crumpled bills and neatly bundled stacks of 1s, 5s, and 10s. $4,212. All I had in the world. I remembered my dad's voice, so full of pride. That Burger Barn money is just for fun. The important stuff, handled. I laughed, a broken, hysterical sound. I picked up my old uniform from the laundry pile. The smell of grease was still there, faint but unmistakable. It no longer smelled like desperation. It smelled like my only chance. For 2 days, I existed in a state of suspended animation. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just moved between my bedroom and the bathroom, a ghost in my own house. The packed boxes mocked me with their optimism. Downstairs, my parents acted as if nothing had happened. They watched TV. They made dinner. The sheer, breathtaking normalcy of it was more insane than any screaming match. By the 3rd day, the grief curdled into a cold, hard knot of resolve. I wasn't ready to give up. I spent hours on my laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating my face in the dark of my room. I researched student loans, payment plans, grants, anything. I made a list. I formulated a strategy. Armed with a folder full of printouts, I went downstairs to find them. They were on the back patio, my dad reading the paper, my mom watering her wilting petunias. This was my attempt at a negotiation. My reasonable, logical appeal to the people who were supposed to love me most. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I sat down at the patio table, spreading my papers out like a general planning a campaign. "I've been looking into options. If you co-sign a private loan for the first year's tuition, I can cover the rest. I'll get a job on campus, maybe 2. I'll work every break. I'll pay you back for whatever you have to put up. We can still make this work." My dad folded his newspaper slowly. He wouldn't look at me. It was my mom who spoke, not even bothering to turn from her flowers. "We can't co-sign anything. Our credit is ruined." "What about a Parent Plus loan?" I pressed, my voice rising slightly. "The federal government offers them. The credit check isn't as strict." "And get into even more debt?" she said, finally turning. "We just lost over $100,000, and you want us to take out more loans?" "It's for my education," I said, incredulous. "The education you promised me. The one you saved for." "We made a bad investment," she said, her tone icy. "It happens. People lose money. You need to accept it." A frantic desperation clawed at my throat. My logical plans were turning to ash. I played my last card, the one I had discovered during my late-night research, the one that made my stomach clench, with both fear and a grim sense of rightness. That fund, it was a UTMA account, wasn't it? A custodial account. Granddad set it up. My dad flinched. My mom's eyes narrowed. "The bank told me how those work," I continued, my heart hammering. "The money in that account was an irrevocable gift. It was legally my property. You were just the custodian. You didn't have the right to take it for a hot dog stand." My mother stared at me for a long, silent moment. Then she laughed. It wasn't a warm sound. It was sharp and ugly, like breaking glass. It was a laugh that said I was the stupidest, most naive child in the world. "My property?" she sneered, wiping a tear of mirth from the corner of her eye. "Oh, that's fantastic. Are you going to get a lawyer, is that it? Are you going to sue your own mother and father?" She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a low, venomous hiss. "Let me explain something to you about your property. We paid the mortgage on the house you live in. We bought the food you eat. We paid for every doctor's visit, every school trip, every birthday present you ever got. It all came from our pocket. You have nothing that we didn't give you, and you have the audacity to talk to us about what's legally yours?" She shook her head, a look of profound disgust on her face. "The money is gone. Your little college dream is gone. Get over it. Go fill out an application for that Burger Barn you were so proud of." She turned her back on me then, dismissing me completely, and went back to her dying flowers. The rejection was absolute. The laughter echoed in my ears, a cruel, looping soundtrack to my life imploding. It wasn't just that they had taken the money, it was that they felt entitled to it. They felt I deserved nothing. You don't deserve it." Her words from days before came rushing back, now underlined by that horrible laugh. I stumbled back to my room, the folder of useless plans slipping from my numb fingers. I collapsed onto the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. This was it. This was the bottom. I had no money, I had no future, and I now knew with sickening certainty that I had no family. The love I thought was the bedrock of my life was conditional, and I had just failed to meet the terms. I was utterly and completely alone. The air in my lungs felt thin, each breath a struggle. The world I had been so excited to step into had vanished, and in its place was just this room, this suffocating silence, and the ghost of my mother's laughter. My eyes fell on the shoebox. $4,212. It was an insultingly small amount to start a life with, but it was mine. It was the only thing that was truly mine. And as I stared at it, the despair began to burn away, leaving something new in its place. Rage. Cold, clear, and focused. My mother had asked if I was going to get a lawyer. She thought it was a joke. She had no idea. That laughter followed me back to my room. It was a physical thing, a shard of glass working its way into my heart. I lay on the floor for hours, listening to the muffled sounds of their life continuing without me downstairs. The television, the clink of ice in a glass, the low murmur of their conversation. My mother's words played on a loop, a litany of my own worthlessness. You don't deserve it. Are you going to sue your own mother and father? Get over it. But you can't just get over an amputation. They had severed me from my own life, and the phantom limb of my future ached with a pain so profound it left me breathless. The rage came slowly at first, a low heat in the pit of my stomach. It was a survival instinct, the last flicker of a pilot light in a house gone cold. They thought I was a child. They thought I would cry, maybe throw a tantrum, and then fold. They expected me to scurry back to the burger barn with my tail between my legs, reeking of grease and failure, and live out the small life they had assigned me. Her laugh, that was the thing, the sheer contemptuous amusement. She hadn't just dismissed my pain, she'd found it funny. Are you going to sue your own mother and father? I sat up. The question, meant to mock me, hung in the air. My eyes landed on my laptop, sitting dormant on my desk. I crawled over to it, my limbs stiff, and flipped it open. The shoebox was beside me, a $4,000 reminder of every aching shift, every rude customer. Every night I'd come home, smelling like a deep fryer. It was my war chest. I didn't start by searching for lawyers. I started with the words I'd thrown at them on the patio, the ones that had earned me that terrible laugh. UTMA account. The search results flooded the screen. The Uniform Transfers to Minors Act. I clicked link after link, devouring legal articles, banking FAQs, and forum posts from financial advisors. The cold, precise language of the law was a balm on my raw emotions. It was objective, it was real, and it was on my side. I read about fiduciary duty. I read about how a custodian, my parents, had a legal obligation to manage the funds for the sole benefit of the minor, me. They were not allowed to use the money for their own personal expenses, their own debts, or their own harebrained investment schemes. And the most important part, the phrase that made my breath catch in my throat, the transfer of assets into a UTMA account constitutes an irrevocable gift. Irrevocable. It was legally mine. My mother's entire tirade about paying for my food and shelter was, in the eyes of the law, completely irrelevant. The money in that account was no more theirs to take than the laptop I was using or the clothes in my closet. They hadn't made a bad investment with family money. They had committed theft. A plan, sharp and clear, began to form in the haze of my anger. I needed proof. I needed the original account documentation. I waited until the next morning, until I heard the garage door rumble open and the car pull away. They were going grocery shopping, their Tuesday ritual. The house fell silent. My heart hammered against my ribs as I crept out of my room and into their office. It was my dad's sanctuary, a place I rarely entered, smelling of old paper and stale coffee. A large, wooden filing cabinet stood against the far wall. I pulled open the top drawer, labeled Finances. My hands shook as I sifted through folders. Mortgage, car payments, taxes 2018. My fingers brushed against a thick manila folder simply marked college. I pulled it out, my breath held tight in my chest. Inside was a mess of papers, old report cards, pamphlets from Northwestern, and then, at the very bottom, a stack of documents from a major investment bank, held together with a rusty paperclip. The top page was a statement from 3 years ago, and there, printed in neat black ink under the account holder information, were the words that sealed their fate. Protagonist's name UTMA by father's name and mother's name custodians. Beneath it, the account balance at the time was a staggering $96,000. But it wasn't the number that mattered. It was the 5 letters, UTMA. It was the concrete, undeniable proof that they had known from the very beginning the legal status of that money. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a calculated betrayal. I carefully slipped the first statement out of the stack, folded it, and tucked it into the waistband of my jeans. Then I returned the folder, slid the drawer shut, and walked back to my room, the cold paper a shield against my skin. The ghost of my mother's laughter was still there, but it sounded different now. It sounded brittle. It sounded like a mistake. I sat on my bed and pulled out the shoebox. I looked at the crumpled bills, the money they'd called adorable and fun. This wasn't fun money anymore. It was justice money. I took out my laptop, opened a new tab, and typed family law attorneys near me. My mother had asked if I was going to sue her. She thought it was the most ridiculous question in the world. She was about to get her answer. The list of family law attorneys felt illicit, like I was looking up black market surgeons. Most of them offered a free initial consultation, but I knew I couldn't just walk in empty-handed. I needed to show I was serious. I took $200 from the shoebox, 10 crisp $20 bills that represented a quarter of a month's work at the Burger Barn, and placed it in an envelope. This was the retainer for my own liberation. I chose a small firm downtown with a woman's name on the shingle, Law Offices of Anya Sharma. The office was on the second floor of an old brick building, up a narrow flight of stairs. It wasn't glamorous. The air smelled like dust and old coffee, and the receptionist looked at me over her glasses with an expression of bored curiosity. I must have looked like a lost kid. Anya Sharma was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a pen she clicked incessantly. I sat across a cluttered metal desk from her, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to keep them from shaking. I told her the whole story, my voice starting as a whisper and growing stronger as I recounted the broken promises, the gourmet hot dog stand, and finally, my mother's laugh. I finished by sliding the folded bank statement across the desk. She unfolded it, her clicking pen falling silent. She read it once, then read it again. Her sharp eyes scanned the document, lingering on the 5 letters I had staked my entire future on. UTMA, she said, her voice flat. She looked up at me, and for the first time her expression softened from professional skepticism to something like grim understanding. They can't do this, she said, her tone absolute. This is a breach of fiduciary duty. It's a textbook case of misappropriation of custodial funds. In layman's terms, she added, her eyes hardening again, it's theft. Hearing the law confirm my rage was like drawing a full, clean breath after being held underwater. I wasn't a selfish child. I was a victim. What do you want to do about it? She asked. I want my money back, I said, the words coming out clear and cold. All of it. That will mean suing your parents, she stated, watching my face for any sign of hesitation. I thought of my mother's sneering question. Are you going to sue your own mother and father? I know, I said. Going home felt like stepping behind enemy lines. I knew I couldn't sustain a long, drawn-out fight if they were suspicious. I needed them to believe they had won. So I began to act the part of the defeated daughter. I stopped locking my bedroom door. I left a community college course catalog on the kitchen table, its pages dog-eared. I even printed out a job application for the Burger Barn and left it on the counter, a silent, pathetic white flag. I let my shoulders slump. I spoke in monosyllables. I was the very picture of a broken spirit. It worked better than I could have ever imagined. The tension in the house evaporated, replaced by a thick, cloying pity. They thought they had broken me, and it made them feel magnanimous. "It's good to see you're being realistic, honey," my dad said one evening, patting my shoulder as he passed me in the hall. My mother was worse. She started treating me with a kind of gentle condescension, as if I were recovering from a long illness. She'd bring me a cup of tea or comment on how much more reasonable I was being. They believed I had accepted my new, smaller life. They had no idea I was secretly meeting with Miss Sharma, signing affidavits, and providing the documentation needed to build the case. The shoebox money dwindled, paying for filing fees and discovery requests, each dollar a small sacrifice on the altar of justice. The final piece of the charade fell into place a week later. I was sitting on the living room couch, staring out the window at the dying summer light, when my mom sat down beside me. She put her arm around my shoulders, a gesture that made my skin crawl. "You know, I'm proud of you," she said, her voice dripping with sincerity. "It takes a big person to admit when they're wrong. That Northwestern dream, it was just a little too big. Some people are meant for those kinds of places, and some people aren't. There's no shame in that." She gave my shoulder a squeeze. "You'll be happier close to home anyway. We all will be." This was it. The final, patronizing nail in the coffin of the daughter she thought I was. She was gloating, assuring me that my failure was for the best, that my rightful place was here, under her thumb. The lawsuit had been filed that morning. The process server was scheduled for tomorrow. It was done. I turned to look at her, at this woman who had stolen my future and was now comforting me for its loss. The rage was a silent, white-hot fire inside me, but on the outside, I was perfectly still. I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I didn't say a word. I just smiled. It was a small, quiet thing, a barely there curve of my lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret, a terrible and beautiful secret. It was the calmest I had felt in weeks. She stared back, her own smile faltering, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. She couldn't comprehend it. She couldn't know that she was a character in a story whose ending had already been written. The smile I gave my mother was the last piece of the performance. For the next 2 months, I was a ghost in their house, a constant, quiet reminder of the future they had erased. The legal battle had been a slow, grinding affair, conducted entirely through Miss Sharma. My parents had hired a lawyer of their own, a friend from my father's golf club, who initially treated the whole thing as a nuisance. They ignored discovery requests. They filed motions to dismiss, calling the suit frivolous and an act of childish rebellion. They never spoke of it to me. They maintained the facade that I was the broken one, the one who needed to come to her senses. They'd sit at the dinner table, discussing their plans to remodel the kitchen, while a stack of legal notices from my lawyer sat unopened on the hall table. They believed so completely in their own authority, in their right to my life, that they couldn't conceive of a world where they would face any consequences. The judgment came down on a Thursday. Miss Sharma called me, her voice crisp with victory. The court had ruled entirely in my favor, granting a summary judgment based on the unambiguous bank records. My parents were ordered to pay me $80,000, the portion of the fund that was verifiably from my grandparents and market growth, plus punitive damages for the breach of their fiduciary duty. My parents, of course, did nothing. They ignored the court order just as they had ignored everything else. In their minds, the judge's ruling was just words on paper. They still had the house, the cars, the life they had built. They had won. That's what they thought until the following Tuesday. It was a bright, cool morning. I was in the kitchen, drinking a glass of water, when I saw the 2 county sheriff's cars pull into our driveway. My mother was in the garden, humming as she pruned her rose bushes. My father was in his office, on the phone, laughing about a bad shot on the 14th hole. They were blissfully, arrogantly unaware. A sharp, authoritative knock echoed through the house. I opened the door. 2 deputies stood on the porch, their faces impassive. Behind them, a man in a polo shirt held a clipboard. "We're here to enforce a writ of execution for a civil judgment," the taller deputy said, not unkindly. He glanced at a paper in his hand. "At the residence of—" He read off my parents' names. My mother, hearing the voices, came bustling toward the door, wiping dirt from her hands onto her jeans. "Can I help you, officers?" she asked, her voice full of cheerful suburban politeness. "Ma'am, we have a court order to seize assets to satisfy a judgment against you and your husband," the deputy said, handing her the document. My father appeared in the hallway behind her, his phone call apparently over. "What's all this about?" My mother was staring at the paper, her smile frozen on her face. "There must be some mistake," she said, her voice a little tight. "This is about that silly lawsuit. The judge can't be serious." She laughed, a short, sharp bark. It was a pale imitation of the laugh she'd used on me on the patio, but the intent was the same: to dismiss, to belittle, to make reality go away. The deputy didn't smile. "The judgment is for $80,000, plus costs. We're here to levy property to satisfy that debt." He nodded to the man with the clipboard, who stepped past my mother into the foyer. "Wait, what are you doing?" my father demanded, his face turning pale. "You can't just come into our house." The man with the clipboard walked into the living room and placed a bright orange sticker on the frame of our 65-inch television. "Item 1, he said into a small recorder. My mother's face crumpled. "Stop that! You can't take our things!" "Ma'am, this is a lawful court order," the deputy said, his voice hardening. "Interfering with a levy is a crime." The man with a clipboard moved to the mahogany dining set. Another orange sticker. He went to the china cabinet, filled with the crystal my mother treasured. Sticker. My father's prized set of golf clubs, visible in the corner of the den. Sticker. It was the chaos I had dreamed of. The panic was a living thing in the room. My father was sputtering, speechless. My mother's face had cycled from confusion to outrage and was now settling into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. Her eyes found me standing silently by the door. "You," she hissed, the word full of venom. "You did this. You did this to us, your own family." I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her, at the woman who had told me I deserved nothing, who had laughed at my pain. "This was our money," she shrieked, her voice cracking as the man tagged a painting over the fireplace. "We gave you everything." "It was my money," I said, and my voice was so calm it seemed to suck the air out of the room. "It was an irrevocable gift. You had a fiduciary duty." The legal terms coming from my mouth seemed to stun them more than the sight of the deputies. This wasn't their hysterical, emotional daughter. This was a stranger. "After everything we've done for you," my father whispered, slumping against the wall. He looked old, defeated. The man with the clipboard was heading for the stairs. "I'll need access to the master bedroom to inventory jewelry and other valuables," he said to the deputy. That broke my mother. "No!" she screamed, lunging for the stairs to block his way. "Get out of my house! Get out!" The second deputy stepped forward, putting a firm hand on her arm. "Ma'am, calm down." She shook him off, her wild eyes landing back on me. "I hope you're happy," she spat, tears of rage tracking through the dirt on her cheek. "I hope you're happy, you ungrateful little bitch. You have nothing now. No family. You're all alone." I thought of my shoebox, now almost empty. I thought of the smell of grease and the ache in my feet. I thought of the future she had tried to burn to the ground. And I looked at this woman, surrounded by the wreckage of the life she'd stolen to build, and I gave her back the same small, secret smile. "No," I said, my voice quiet but clear. "I'm just getting started." The deputy's hand on my mother's arm was the only thing keeping her from physically attacking me. My father, looking 10 years older than he had that morning, slid down the wall to sit on the floor, his head in his hands. The man with the clipboard and the orange stickers paid them no mind, his footsteps methodical as he moved toward my father's office. "My desk," my father mumbled, his voice muffled by his palms. "My grandfather's desk." He looked up at me then, his face a wreck of desperation and disbelief. He scrambled to his feet and stumbled toward me, his hands outstretched, not in anger, but in a plea. "Honey, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "Tell them to stop. We'll figure something out. We'll get you the money. Just make them stop." My mother, seeing his new tactic, immediately changed her own. The venom in her eyes was replaced by a desperate, theatrical sorrow. "He's right," she said, her voice dropping to a pained whisper. "You can stop this. We're your family. We made a mistake, a terrible mistake. Please don't do this to us. Don't do this to your father." The man with the clipboard emerged from the office and placed a sticker on the heavy oak desk. My father flinched as if he'd been struck. Their pleas were the final pathetic act in a play I was no longer a part of. I felt nothing, no pity, no surge of familial duty. Just the cold, clean finality of a business deal gone bad. I held up a hand, not to them, but to the lead deputy. "Excuse me, officer," I said, my voice steady. "Could you give us 5 minutes? I believe we can resolve this." The deputy looked from my pleading parents to my calm face, gave a slight nod, and motioned for his partner and the asset tagger to wait in the foyer. He had seen this drama play out 100 times. He knew who had the power. When we were alone, I turned to the 2 people who had raised me. They looked at me with a sliver of hope, thinking their emotional appeal had worked, that their little girl was finally coming to her senses. "There's nothing to figure out," I said, my voice quiet and flat. "The time for that is over. The judge has ruled. The lawsuit is settled. Pay me the $80,000 in damages, or the sheriff seizes your assets. It's that simple." "We don't have $80,000 in cash," my mother cried, gesturing wildly around the room. "That's why they're here. We can't just write you a check." "I know," I said. I reached into the back pocket of my jeans and pulled out a folded sheaf of papers. Miss Sharma had prepared me for this exact moment. But there is a way to make them leave. I unfolded the documents and placed them on the now stickerless coffee table. They stared at the papers as if they were a snake. "What is that?" my father asked, his voice trembling. "It's a promissory note and a settlement agreement," I explained, my tone as clinical as my lawyer's. "You will sign this, acknowledging the $80,000 debt as ordered by the court. It will be secured with a lien against this house. You'll make monthly payments. If you miss a single one, the lien is executed and the house is sold to satisfy the debt. Once you sign it, I will tell the deputies the matter is settled and they will leave." A wave of relief washed over my father's face. "Okay," he said quickly. "Yes, we'll sign it. We'll sign anything." My mother looked suspicious. "That's it? We sign, and this all goes away?" "Not quite," I said. I tapped the second page. "This isn't just about the money. This is our severance." The word hung in the air between us, cold and sharp. "Severance?" my mother repeated, confused. "You sign the note," I said, looking from her face to my father's. "And I will leave. I'll pack my bags and I will be out of this house within the hour. You will make your payments and I will go to college and build my life. We will have no further contact, no calls, no emails, no surprise visits at my dorm. I will no longer be your daughter and you will no longer be my parents. We will be 2 parties and a financial agreement and nothing more. You get to keep your furniture and I get to be free of you." The silence that followed was heavier than anything that had come before. The color drained from my father's face. My mother stared at me, her mouth slightly agape, the full consequence of her actions finally dawning on her. They hadn't just lost money in a bad investment. They hadn't just lost a lawsuit. They were losing me. This was the price. You don't mean that," my father whispered. "You're our child. You forfeited that title when you stole my future and laughed about it," I said. I picked up a pen from a side table and placed it on top of the papers. "The price to keep your things is $80,000. The price to keep your daughter was to not betray her. You can only afford one of those." So sign the papers, or I'll tell the deputies to take the car. I looked at the grand piano in the corner, another prized possession, and the piano. I hear they get a good price for those. My mother looked from the pen to my face to the deputies waiting patiently in the hall. The choice was simple. It was a choice between her things and her daughter. I already knew which one she would pick. My mother snatched the pen from the table. For a wild second, I thought she might throw it at me. Instead, with a hand that trembled with rage, she scrawled her signature on the bottom line. It wasn't a name. It was an injury inflicted on the paper. My father followed, his movements slow and defeated, his signature a weak, wavering line. He couldn't look at me. I took the papers, folded them neatly, and nodded to the deputy in the hall. We've reached an agreement. The officers left. The man with the stickers collected his clipboard and followed them out. The silence they left behind was absolute. I walked past my parents, went up to my room, and packed a single duffel bag. I took my clothes, my laptop, my shoebox, and the Northwestern sweatshirt that had been my beacon. Everything else, every book and photo and piece of my childhood, I left behind. It was all part of the house they had chosen over me. I walked out the front door and never looked back. They made the payments for 17 months. Each month, a check for the agreed-upon amount would arrive at Miss Sharma's office, a bitter reminder of the contract that now defined our relationship. I was in my second year at Northwestern, thriving in a way I never could have if I'd been working 3 jobs to survive. The money wasn't a windfall. It was a salary for a job I was finally allowed to do. Be a student. It paid for my dorm room, my meal plan, my books. It paid for the peace of mind to study late in the library, breathing in the scent of old paper and dust instead of stale grease. It bought me the freedom to become myself. Then the check stopped. Miss Sharma called me. They had missed 1 payment, then 2. They ignored the default notices. Their pride, it seemed, was more powerful than their financial sense. They couldn't stand the monthly humiliation, the proof that I had won. So they did what they always did. They buried their heads in the sand and pretended the consequences didn't exist. But the lien was real. The foreclosure proceedings were swift and brutal. Which brings us back to the beginning. To me, sitting across the mahogany table from Anya Sharma, looking at a cashier's check for $80,000, it wasn't a payment from my parents. It was my share of the proceeds from the court-ordered sale of their house. They got a small apartment across town, I hear, Miss Sharma said gently, seeing the look on my face. He had to sell the golf club membership they're managing. I nodded, folding the check and slipping it into my bag. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I just felt a profound sense of closure. The transaction was complete. The house, the furniture, the life they valued more than their own daughter. It was all gone, liquidated to pay a debt they refused to acknowledge. My mother had shrieked that I would have nothing, that I would be all alone. She was wrong. I had my education. I had a future I had built myself. I had this check, the final piece of my stolen property, now rightfully returned. And I was alone, yes, but I wasn't lonely. I was free. Looking back, the price of my freedom was $80,000 and the family I thought I had. It's a cost I would pay again in a heartbeat. Because what I learned is that some people aren't meant to be in your life forever, not even the ones who are supposed to be. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is sign your own severance papers. This was the story of how I lost everything to gain it all back. If you've ever had to fight for the life you deserve, maybe you'll want to stick around for what comes next. Make sure you're subscribed, because my story is far from over.